Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this Friday afternoon I am joined by Lloyd Patrick Jepson, a regular on the Friday show, and Alan Morrison, who comes in once a month to tell us all about players like Bernabe and Iwata and other such players who may or may not start this weekend, but we're going to be asking your views on them, Alan. Welcome back to the show, sir. Before we talk about Kilmarnock, you guys haven't, certainly on Acsom, had an opportunity to talk about the Rangers game. Alan, I know that the huddle breakdown went out during the week there. I've seen that it got quite a bit of traction on that. So I know you've discussed it, but we'll be covering some of that. Any other comments that come up in the comment section, as well as some of the other points that have been raised during a very interesting week to be a Celtic supporter. We're going to start, though, with the Kilmarnock game. We're going into this game, and I always find that there's a sense of balance going into just about any game at the moment. We're not overconfident. We know what we're capable of. But going into the Kilmarnock game, I've suggested Iwata over Mooy going into that game. Lloyd, do you think there will be a few changes going into the match?
I don't see there being too many changes, but obviously after Mooy's performance against Rangers, you would kind of maybe say that Iwata would maybe be the obvious one that would come in over anyone. So yeah, I would like to see Iwata start, and I think most of the commenters for what I'm seeing so far would like to see Iwata start as well. So yeah, go for Iwata.
Big thing for me with that is, I don't want people to think that I'm just throwing Mooy under a bus or chucking him out, chucking the baby out with the bathwater and all that. I think Mooy has been absolutely sensational, particularly since the World Cup. I know it was a bit of a slow burn with Aaron Mooy, but he's done so well, and he was one of the first names on the team sheet not that long ago. I think what happened, Alan, he might have just rushed back. It wasn't about match fitness, it was just about sharpness. He just didn't seem as sharp as he normally was against Rangers, Alan.
No, I mean, absolutely, for sure. I mean, he was very ponderous looking. Just his physical movements, his decision making was also slow, and it just stood out a mile. Why is that? Yeah, like you say, we don't know in terms of fitness, training, performance, etc. But he did look undercooked for sure. He does strike me as somebody a little bit like Tom Rogic, his compatriot, who Rogic, quite famously, it took a long time to get up to full match fitness. He tended to be, I think his build, he was quite a big framed chap, and whether that had anything to do with it, it just seemed to, and Mooy's not particularly large, but you wouldn't call him a sort of lithe, athletic looking player either. Maybe there's just a bit something in the sort of physiology of them that takes a little bit more time to get up to speed. So having said all that, I would not be astonished if Mooy starts again on the weekend. To be honest, I think if on the basis that the only way he's going to get back up to full match sharpness is to play matches, and I think the way he's performed this season, you wouldn't argue against him, maintaining his place on the form that he's shown this season. So yeah, I don't think Ange is one for making mass changes unless it's like a League Cup tie at home or something, or just making changes for the sake of it. I think he tries to be fairly consistent in his selection. So I wouldn't have a problem with Iwata playing, but as I say, I think I'd be surprised if Mooy was actually dropped.
You know this, Alan, I think going into that Rangers game, there was a lot of discussion around the potential dropping of Matt O'Reilly. And a day or two before the game, I remember saying that Ange is far more likely to let him play through that, supposed loss of form. And then I think that he was very effective against Rangers, involved in all 3 goals. So absolutely get what you mean there. I seen something just before we came on live. Someone on one of the Celtic groups were saying this would be my starting lineup. There's about 4 changes in it, and I think that's just change for change's sake, and Ange really doesn't do that. But we really haven't seen him doing that. That isn't an MO of Ange Postecoglou. The other one that's been raised, there's been a couple actually raised this week, one of which was a wee suggestion that Bernabe should maybe come in to rest Taylor for the big game, albeit every game is big. By the way, we do have Brian Degnan coming into the show, so we're going to have to welcome in Brian. We're going to have to do the big drum roll, get him in. Here we are, a couple of minutes late, but that's good. There we are. Brian Degnan, welcome in. How's it going?
Just in the nick of time.
Just in the nick of time. Absolutely. So we're 4 strong. By the way, I've got to say yesterday, we had an absolute brand new start, a debutant in Peter McGackie. I thought he was brilliant because it's not as easy as it looks, sitting in front of that camera and giving your opinion and all that. So well done, Peter, and Matthew as well. Matthew Marr came in for his second appearance, so he's a grizzly old veteran. JP was working yesterday, so we did have a slightly different look to the Thursday club or the Thursday show. But we're just talking, Brian, about potential changes for the Kilmarnock game, and the fact that Ange doesn't seem to tinker just for the sake of it. However, there has been suggestions during the week on Acsom and from the commenters that perhaps Mooy will drop out for Iwata. Alan would expect to see Mooy starting because of the form prior to the Rangers game, prior to his injury, rather. What's your take on it? Do you think Ange will make a change?
I don't think he will, no. I think, so I'd said last time I was on, I would like to see Iwata with Matt Riley and McGregor push forward. I think that's real creative midfield, but I just don't think against Kilmarnock we need that sort of more traditional sitter that Iwata seems to be. I don't think we need that. I think we probably just need that bit more creativity to break down Kilmarnock. So I would imagine Mooy comes back in. What we have seen, although Mooy, when he first came to Celtic, his fitness wasn't great, his performances weren't great at first, but he quickly got up to speed. But what we haven't seen is 2 bad performances on the bounce. So I think he'll come back stronger. And as I said, I expect Ange will stick with the same midfield purely because Kilmarnock, I imagine, will sit in camp in the box. So you want as many creative players in that middle of the park. And I just don't think you need Iwata for this game, although I would like to see him starting moving forward.
Yeah, there's been 2 other main suggestions during the week that I want to cover today. The first being Bernabe coming in at left back, Lloyd. I'm going to ask yourself because he's another player that I think a bit of perseverance is required here due to the fact that he's young. You've got to take into account the change in culture, climate, style, everything that he's had to put up with. And the fact that, some players are slow burners, and I think we need to show a bit of patience with him. His transfer fee was fairly high for the age of the boy. And this is just the eye test. I'm going to ask Alan to maybe give us some data to back it up or otherwise. It doesn't look that convincing defensively, I don't think. But the suggestion for Bernabe to come in for Greg Taylor is, I think, based on the fact that we need Greg Taylor to be fighting fit for the Rangers game. So we're actually looking 3 games ahead here. What's your take on it? Who do you play at left back?
I would like to see Bernabe come in just for the fact that it's a 4G pitch, and if Taylor is carrying any knocks, you don't really want to risk any more injuries to that squad, especially with the semi-final coming up. So I would like to see Bernabe start in that aspect. But at the same time, you also want to start your best team every game. So it's ideally you want Taylor playing, but if he is carrying that knock, then Bernabe comes in just for the fact that it's a 4G pitch.
Yeah. I think back to a game, the date escapes me, but it was a 3-0 game at Celtic Park, and it was beautiful sunshine. There was a real coming together between the fans, the players, and the management that day. Neil Lennon was in charge. We beat them 3-0, and it was Chris Commons scored a ball that kind of went both ways. It swerved around McGregor. You'll remember the game 3-0, and we followed it up at Fir Park with a 2-0 defeat. So it's all about, we've done all the hard work to get the 12 points ahead. So yeah, the tinkering and the changes and all that kind of stuff, I don't think Ange is going to do it. But with Taylor's injury in mind, Alan, is it something that you think might be at the forefront of Ange's team selection?
Yeah, I think if there's any doubts about fitness, as Lloyd said, then I think that's fair enough. But it was just a case of rotation for rotation's sake. I don't think it'll happen. It's a week since the last played. It's not as if the players are being overworked at the moment. So to me, there'd be no reason, unless it was just to protect an injury, there'd be no reason really to make that change in terms of the continuity of the team. The league still has to be won, so that's the priority really. As far as and putting Bernabe in is a risk because of the nature of the player that he is. I think he's fascinating. I think there's a lot of similarity between Bernabe, Hatate, and O. They're all kind of quite young, inexperienced players who look like they've got all the tools that you need to play the roles that we're asking them to play, but each just has little areas of development, which is natural for young players. With Bernabei, it's all about decision making. It's all about decision making. He's physically, he's although he's not particularly tall, he's got great balance. He's got great speed across the ground. He's strong. He's very aggressive. As a defender, he's similar in nature to Carl Starfer. He's a front foot defender. He's aggressive. He'll go and try and win every ball. He's not a passive defender. I have mixed feelings on that, if I'm honest, because if you're an aggressive front foot defender, your decision making has to be spot on every single time. Otherwise, you can get turned, or you can make bad errors. Going forward, as I say, his pace and transition is excellent. And also that means that his recovery pace much better than Taylor. One of Taylor's weaknesses is just obviously he's attacking a lot. He's getting into different positions. If he needs to get back quickly to his station, he's not got the quickest ground speed. With Bernabei, the big issue is just, as I say, is decision making, and you see that in the number of turnovers that he gives away. So rather than it being his defending per se, because as I say, I think he's quite an aggressive defender. It's more about he just makes bad passing decisions. He, when to run, when to pass, etc. It's those things. Now, they're all learnable, but also they're the hardest part of the game, because it comes back to sort of innate intelligence as well. So, can he improve his game intelligence? Really, is what we're saying. So, I think he's got a lot of development to do in that regard. I'm really happy with how he looks physically. The way that he plays the game makes complete sense for the way that Celtic play under Ange, in terms of his aggression, his pace, his recovery, his transition play. I love the fact that he pops up in really interesting positions on the pitch. You can often find him on the edge of the opposition box, which is exactly what Ange is looking for, to try and create overloads and to find space. But yeah, I wouldn't be necessarily risking an away game at Kilmarnock as a sort of development opportunity for him. I mean, yeah, by all means, bring him on 30 minutes to go if Taylor's maybe got a knock or something, but I don't think we'll change the lineup for him.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. What you've been saying, the aggressive side of this side, actually, of Ange Postecoglou's team is something I think that's often overlooked. I don't mean aggression as in aggressively high tempo. I mean the absolute aggression and combative nature of the likes of Johnston, Bernabei, like you mentioned, McGregor, and I've seen that coming into some of the other players, some of the flair players as well, which I really like the look of that, because I think that when you're in a battle, and that often happens in Scottish football, you really need that. Brian, Taylor is and has been, under Ange Postecoglou, one of our most important players and one of our most effective players. And as Alan says, going forward, he's fantastic as well. What do you reckon? Do you think it's a case of you play your strongest team and then, try and get this game put to bed, and then put 30 minutes in the legs of Bernabei and Iwata and that type of player who's maybe not getting as much minutes as they would like?
So I think there's a couple of ways of looking at it. I think if it was if we're playing midweek in weekend games still at this stage, I can understand why he might rotate, but I don't see the merit in rotating in case someone gets injured, because Taylor could get injured at training. There's nothing to say that him not playing against Kilmarnock keeps him in picture perfect health. So I would play him. I would start him. I think, it's funny, if we could go back in time before Ange Postecoglou got appointed and say that
do we need to do that?
Second season, 12 points ahead, and Greg Taylor's probably our best player this season, or certainly one of three. Football's an amazing thing, and I think Taylor's been excellent. Just on Bernabei, I think Bernabei's got incredible potential. I think guys like him, Kobayashi in particular, and Iwata probably next season, you'll see a lot more of, because I think by that time they'll be up to speed. If you look at the difference from Taylor from last season to this, he was good last season, he's been excellent this season, and I think that's down to coaching. So I expect big things for, and it's not that I think Bernabei's technically a project player. I don't think that's accurate. I think he's a first team player, and I think he'll be that next season. I think he's incredibly skillful, and it's funny what Al says about him and Starfelt. When you've got two really aggressive defenders both playing on the left side, that worries me more than just having two aggressive defenders, because if they're both attacking the same areas or going for that, there's a wee risk being left open. But I expect Kilmarnock's only sort of, offence against us will be sort of long balls or trying to get balls into the channel. So there's an argument Bernabei has got better recovery pace, but you'd have to say Taylor's decision making is better. So I would start Taylor.
It's an interesting point there, Brian, you make about Greg Taylor and the second season version of Greg Taylor. And I think that Ange Postecoglou has done that with quite a few players. I mean, I would put Hatate into that bracket. I thought Hatate was brilliant last season. But I think the version of Hatate we've seen this season is an improvement. And is
a lot more consistent this season as well.
Aye.
It's not as much in flashes now. You start seeing it's a week on week he's offering.
Aye, definitely. I mean, arguably Kyogo as well. Maybe that's skewed a wee bit by the goal scoring, but I think that bodes well for the likes of Bernabei, Iwata, Kobayashi, and Haksabanovic, because these are guys that haven't had that run of a dozen games, starting for a dozen games or so. And it's almost like a hidden weapon, right? What we're going to be doing in the transfer market, we will have to bring some players in, but we've got these 5 guys here who haven't played a load of games, who are bedding in, who are constantly improving, and hopefully we will see a version of them next season that will vastly improve the overall squad. The other one I think that's been brought up, and again, this might be a bit unfair, and I read some of the comments after the live show yesterday on the YouTube channel, as I often do, just to, see who's winding us up and who's having a pop and all that kind of stuff. And if there's any lurkers who can't comment on the live show because you need to subscribe, but then come in afterwards and comment, as well as all the nice ones as well. And a few people were saying that Maeda's getting a bit of a hard time on Acsom because people are talking about maybe bringing in Haksabanovic for Maeda. I think Maeda, the role he plays in the team, and particularly in the games against Rangers, Lloyd, is absolutely pivotal. But at the same time, it's good to have somebody like Haksabanovic biting at your ankles to try and get a game. Is that a change that you can see happening? Or again, do you stick with the tried and tested and maybe bring these guys on for the last 30?
You would probably say you'd bring them on for the last 30. I mean, Maeda does get a bit of stick now and again, and something I can see why he does. But that role he plays in that team with his face down the wing, and also a lot of covering for Taylor as well, which I think goes under the radar as well. So you go with Maeda there. He's tried and tested. I wouldn't say he's Ange's favourite player, but Ange knows what he gets out of him. And as long as that's good enough for Ange, then it should well.
Yeah, I mean, Haksabanovic, I've just said there, we'll probably see a better version of him next season, but it's been brought up, and again, I think it is a bit unfair. I'm going to ask Alan, because obviously, Alan, you view the game slightly differently from a punter like me sitting in a chair observing it and making observational notes about it, mental notes about it. Maeda, I see him as brilliant defensively, as Lloyd says. Is that qualified by the data?
Yeah, absolutely. Maeda is what he is, and I suspect he's one of these players like Starfelt that we mentioned before that he isn't going to change. So you either like it or you tolerate it, sort of thing. In terms of the strengths and weaknesses, aren't going to massively change at this stage. I don't think. You're not going to get with Maeda. You're not going to get clever trickery. You're not going to get trying to beat a player with a feint or a drop of the shoulder. You're not going to get taking 5 men on in midfield type of thing. What you're going to get is you're just going to get outright pace as soon as he gets the ball, and you're going to get just an incredible work rate, and that comes through in all the sort of defensive metrics around pressures and counter pressures and so forth. Excuse me, and his ability to sort of work back. I mean, the League Cup final was a great example of what you get with Maeda, or what you can get with Maeda, in that on the ball, he probably couldn't have had a more disappointing game. He was almost falling over the ball at times when he got it, but off the ball, he gave Celtic something that no other player can give them. So he pretty much stopped Tavernier from getting up the pitch all by himself. He pretty much occupied that whole sort of right-hand side of their attack, and put their defence under constant pressure, kept them honest in terms of how they defended and how they used the ball, and that's what you get with him. And I think in an attacking sense, his output stats, if you like, so expected goals, expected assists, things like that, are definitely lower than any of the other attackers. but his defensive metrics, as I say, in terms of pressing, counter-pressing, forcing errors in the final third, winning the ball back up high, are just well ahead of anyone else. So he plays a very specific role in this team, and I think it's an important role, and I don't think anyone else can play it, frankly, as well. Kyogo probably could, but you wouldn't want to sort of move Kyogo out of the centre, really. So I think, he's what I'd like to see is, I think after the World Cup, he seemed to come back a much more confident player, and it seemed like he felt he could express himself a little bit more. There was, if you remember that goal against Hibernian when he ran from the halfway
Oh,
line,
yeah.
cut inside, and curled in, you sort of think, you've got that, you can do that, but we just don't see enough of that. And that just seemed to come from a sense of confidence, but also a sense of responsibility, maybe stepping up a little bit in terms of his role in the team and taking on more responsibility on his shoulders. Maybe in the last few games, he's kind of gone back to what he was before the World Cup. So, yeah, I'd like to see that version of Maeda back again, where he feels empowered to be a more expressive version of himself. But absolutely mission critical, I think, to the way that Celtic play.
Yeah, I mean, that was sensational that night against Hibs. Just another question around that position of the park then, Alan, before I ask Brian his opinion on it. Haksabanovic, is he a left winger? Is he a number 10? Where are you with Haksabanovic?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said on the huddle breakdown, I'm firmly of the belief that he's really a number 10. He doesn't have the out and out pace of a winger. His close control, his first touch, his vision are excellent. His passing ability is excellent. I think he could cause a lot of damage in that number 10 role. He's quite strong as well. Although he's only quite little again. He's like Bernabé. He's quite stocky and got a good core strength, so he can take the ball in and hold it under pressure, which is key in that position. So yeah, I don't see him as a sort of out and out winger, really. But having said that, he's perfectly serviceable in that role. Again, because he doesn't need pace to beat a man. He's one of those players that all he does is shift the ball. He can shift the ball very quickly, and that just gives him the space and the time to make the cross or make the pass. So he doesn't need to blast past somebody like Maeda does. So I'm not have a problem with him playing out wide, but I think if you're looking at it optimally, he would be a number 10, I think.
Yeah, I think you agree with that, don't you, Brian?
Yeah, I really like him in that position. Actually, I think he's just he's such a good dribbler as well. But he's not like he doesn't like jink past people. He can drag people out of positions. He can find wee pockets for passes. He can make loads of space. So I like him as a 10 as well, to be fair. However, I think sometimes when you look at Angie's team, although they're set out in certain positions, if you freeze frame at any point, Hatati's wide left, Taylor's sitting as a number 6. Ralston's in the box as a second striker. So people are moving about all over the place. So it's not inconsequential where they play, but I also think that him out wide, a lot of times he comes in anyway, and then someone overlaps. So he is in that 10 position quite a lot. So I don't think it has to be stuck there necessarily. But yeah, I really like him. I think he's again a player that will benefit for a good full pre-season, and you see a lot more of him next year. Like more goals from him, to be honest. I think he's capable of it, especially because he gets in those central positions. But again, maybe that'll come next year.
Yeah, when I'm looking across that, the kind of the entertaining side of the field, the offensive side, there was a suggestion during the week there that we might have to look on the right hand side so that we're not as it's as if we've got a lot of options on the left, not as many on the right. Now, there's a few reasons for that. Jamesy Forrest's injury problems might be one of them. Abada, the other day, Colin wasn't happy with Abada's performance. I think, when you look at his numbers, I'm pretty sure this season and last season that they've been very, very good. But there's a suggestion, there's speculation he might be moving on. Is it a position, do you think, Lloyd, on the right-hand side that we will be looking to strengthen in the summer?
I think that's one area in the pitch that we will be looking at. I'd probably maybe also say maybe right back as well, we might be looking at as well, and also goalkeeper in the summer. But definitely that right wing position, how long is James Forrest going to continue playing? We don't know, because I think he's 31 now, James, so he's probably got about a couple of years left on his contract as well. Abada, if he's wanting away, then you're going to need, probably Ange does have the replacement set in for that position, but we won't know obviously until summertime. So let's just wait and see on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's unfortunate for James A, I think, because I was one of the champions, I think, of him getting the new deal. I could see the whole, thought process behind it. Not just because it's good to have people around the club that know the club. I don't subscribe to that, because I've heard the argument made that, it's good to have Scott Bain and James McCarthy at the club because they're good behind the scenes. I don't think you keep two players for those reasons when they're not contributing. And obviously, James's injuries have flared up again this season. So I hope he overcomes that. But we definitely need some more kind of backup on the right-hand side. I'll tell you something, though. Going into the Rangers game, Alan, Celtic and Rangers were the two formed teams. You look at the last 6 games when you look at the league table. But we could have gone back the last dozen games. And then obviously Celtic's run extended a lot longer than that and continues to as well after the game. But the other teams in the league that are doing really well and have done for a while now are Aberdeen, St Mirren and Motherwell. So I look at the other fixtures at this stage of the season, because you're still looking for your main challengers to slip up. And I think, even though they're playing at home, I think they're playing a team they probably don't want to be facing, Rangers, in St Mirren. And I've been hearing some bullish comments from Stephen Robinson, who is well up for this one as well. I love to see it, because, sometimes it takes that one defeat and then it's a wobble. I think Celtic will continue with the form that we've had. But I think they face a challenge there. People might be surprised there at Ibrox and with the outcome of that. Do you think there's a shock in the cards? Can you see it happening?
I mean, the sad truth is that the gulf between, well, probably first and second, but certainly second and the rest of the league is too much. I think it's a huge gulf, and the league table and the results week on week. I mean, I don't think either of the top two have lost to anyone other than each other since September or October or something ridiculous like that. So that's not a healthy situation. I think St Mirren are a team to be admired this season. I think of all the teams in the league, they're probably the best coached team, the most organised and coherent team outside of the top two, in terms of they have a consistency about how they play, a consistency of performance that he gets out of those players. I mean, it's not, again, I think one of the probably a discussion for another time, but it kind of a bit depressing to me that there's such an emphasis on sort of long ball, second ball type football in this league. I think that's one of the reasons why Scottish football isn't developing as it should. And St Mirren are a team that doesn't mind not having the ball, and with Curtis Main and with the players that they've got, they do rely on a lot of long balls. But having said all that, they do play well above their budget and their limitations and their personnel. And the sum of the parts is definitely greater than the individual components, for sure. So yeah, no, that'll be a tough game. Whether they've got enough to get through at Ibrox, again, results throughout the seasons would suggest not. But they're certainly a team to be applauded in terms of their consistency and their coherence of the way they play.
Mm-hmm. You look at these teams, we had a discussion, Brian, just the other day. You look at teams like St Mirren, who get the right man in, you know what you're getting with Stephen Robinson, very, very well drilled, organised side. Difficult at times to beat. And again, Martindale's done it at Livingston. Kettlewell's doing really well at Motherwell. You've previously seen Callum Davidson doing something similar with St Johnstone, with success, with trophies as well. But the other teams that Alan alludes to there, where you've got the gap between obviously second and all the rest, I look at them and I just think to myself, there's so much more they could do. They could do so much better. And one of the big things, you could maybe look at these more provincial clubs and see some of the things that they're doing and implement it, because they do seem like they're just short-termism. The decision-making has been really, really poor at Hibs. When you look at the managers, the stat I was looking at was how many managers have these clubs had since Ange Postecoglou took over at Celtic. So Rangers have had 3, Aberdeen have had 3, Hibs have had 3, Dundee United have had 4, and Hearts are on to their second, albeit he's an interim gaffer. So I think, there's a tendency, Brian, for all these teams and the fan base and often the voices in the media to blame Celtic, and they'll lump in Rangers into the argument for all the Scottish football ails and all the issues in Scottish football. And I just think it's about time that these clubs took ownership You know, Hibs, they've got to develop their own fan base. They've got to have a stability about them. They've got to produce their own players. They've got to do business in the transfer market better. But I think the onus has to go back onto the individual clubs, Brian, so that there could be more of a challenge and the quality of the game could improve. What's your take on it?
I won't repeat my rant from Monday where I was talking about, winning mentalities and weak mentalities, because I think that, we've had a lot of clubs talking about financial goals and stuff like that. But use Hibs for an example. Look at the money they've spent on either manager compensation or player transfers or player wages. It's madness. The budgets are there. I saw some. I can't remember where I saw it, but it was like looking at your sort of leagues, European leagues, and like the Swedish leagues. I think even the Dutch league. There was a few other leagues, and actually the Scottish teams have more money, more financial clout than a lot of these leagues. They just don't use it well. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is, if you look at what happened with Stephen Glass at Aberdeen, Stephen Glass tried to come in and play an attractive football, try to change that mentality, trying to play well, and he got slaughtered for it because the results weren't there. They didn't have the patience. So they recruited players to play that way, bind them, change manager, change philosophy completely with that same squad. That's never going to work. It just isn't. You mentioned Stevie Robinson at St Mirren doing a great job with that squad. Now, if he's in charge there for years to come, he'll probably keep doing the same thing, right? Which is fine because it works, and he can buy players in to suit that. Mm-hmm. If he leaves, if they've got any brains, they get somebody in that plays the same way and try and keep that going, and they look closely at what they're buying. But it's just scatterbrained approaches in Scottish football, and it's always the well, if we finish top 6, we get some money and we survive to next season. Mm-hmm. It doesn't ever strike me, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I've been harsh, but the chairman of these clubs don't seem very aspirational. There doesn't seem a lot of planning and a lot of sort of, look, this is how we go from. If you're a small business, right, not a cafe, either the cafe that wants to survive and just get through to next month, blah blah blah, or you go, right, how can I optimise the money? Maybe open up a second cafe, and a third, try and grow the business. And football clubs don't operate like that in Scotland. They pretend they do, and they say they do, and they make excuses, but they simply don't. And they've only got themselves to blame. And I know there's a financial gap between Celtic and maybe Rangers, we're not sure, in the rest of the league, but it's not big enough to justify the complete gap in quality. In my opinion, they should be performing far, far above where they are.
Mm-hmm. Brian mentioned there, Lloyd, and I'll come to you on this one, the financial element of it. And, I read with interest the quote that came out after the EPL have obviously made an announcement in relation to betting companies no longer appearing on the front of the jerseys as of 2025-26 season. And the SPFL came out and made a statement about it. But it was, the wording of it was very interesting because it was going on about the financial element and the fact that it plays a big part, and each club will make their own decisions based on their own financial. So basically, what they were saying is we're no, in a position, we don't have the luxury to say no to betting companies because if they're giving us money, we're going to have to take it. That's what it kind of read as. What's your take on it? I heard it yesterday when the announcement was made down south, and I thought to myself, right, that was going to come. Of course it was. I mean, you go back to the days, you look at old football programmes and they're advertising cigarettes, for example, and we know that that's completely changed now and all this. We knew it was coming. Do you think it will eventually filter into the Scottish game, or do you think it will just be money and the financial element over, whether or not it's a right thing to see on a Celtic jersey or any team in Scotland's jersey?
I think it's quite poor if that's what the league's coming out and saying, that because financially they need that betting money coming into the game, because the sponsorship's out there elsewhere. So from my point of view, that's poor, because the league should be expanding and searching for better sponsorship deals. They are particularly want to see Dafa bet on a Celtic top for the next 10 years. Not particularly, no, because I hate that big, massive yellow D on it, but that's my own opinion again. So, but it's sponsorship and things like that. It's about searching for the right business and the right branding that's going to elevate your league or give you that exposure. Scottish Premiership just doesn't do it very well. That's the be all and end all of it.
No,
They
I agree with that. No, I agree with that. I mean, we should never have been in a situation, Lloyd, in the last 10, 20, or, since sponsorship became prevalent within the game, we should never have been in a situation where one of our main trophies of the three didn't have a sponsor. And that's just down, and I'm going to go back to what Brian was talking about, aspirational. That's just basically like having a really bad approach to business. And I think that we've got ourselves in a situation now, Alan, I'm going to ask your thoughts on it, where I'm going to say the big clubs now, it's an easy fix, isn't it? Big betting company comes along, dangles a carrot. All right, we'll plaster that on the hoops. And by the way, I agree with you, Lloyd, in relation to the fact that it doesn't look great on the hoops, because
No, it doesn't.
I do study the jerseys. Everybody knows that I'm a proper pervert when it comes to football jerseys, and I would rather there was no sponsor on it, but I'm also a realist, Alan. I know that sponsorship is a massive part of income. I understand that. At some point in my lifetime, I probably expect to see a sponsor at Celtic Park on the stadium rights. That probably will happen. However, this announcement kind of makes people start thinking, well, if it's happening down there, how can we not do it? How can we not get a wee bit more creative, like Lloyd says, and bring in bigger companies to the table? Or is it just the short-sightedness and short-termism of Scottish football that we're all a bit tired of, Alan? Is that what prevents us from doing it?
It's just the lack of talent, the inertia of the leading, the governing bodies. They're change resistant. I mean, sports a devolved matter in Scotland, so it doesn't necessarily follow that Scotland will be forced down the same path. But as Lloyd rightly said, it happened with cigarettes, it happened with alcohol sponsorship, and it will happen with betting. It's inevitable. It's just read the room. That's the way that the industry is going. So Scottish football should be getting ahead of that and looking at what the alternatives are. I mean, this notion that we can't do better is what's tied us to horrendous television sponsorship deals for the last few years. The Sky one, where they don't even bother to use the full allocation of games that they're allowed to show, where there are whole programs of games in midweek with no competing English matches, and they don't even bother to show a Scottish game. And this all becomes because people think, oh, but we can't do better. So no, it's just the lack of talent and that leads the game. Another sort of related point that I'm fascinated to see how it plays out is in England. It looks like it's almost a done deal. I think that football will have a regulator in place and a regulatory body to sit outside of the game and oversee all aspects of it. Again, in Scotland, it's a devolved matter. It doesn't follow that Scotland should have that. But I would hope that, again, in Scotland, we go down that road and at least start to apply better governance and oversight to the game. And that's another issue where, I no doubt we'll lag behind. They'll be kicking and screaming and moaning because it's change, because it's, it's different, because it requires people to think outside the box and get off their arses and so forth, and so therefore it will be resisted. But yeah, I think it is just a lack of talent really at the head of the game, and it comes back to our previous conversation about as far as the SPFL is concerned, the SPSL as we keep being told is the clubs. So the people that run that organisation are the same people that run the clubs, right? And they're the same ones that. As you said, whether it's Ian Cathro at Hearts or Sean Maloney at Hibs or Stephen Glass at Aberdeen, when someone comes along and tries to do something different, tries to play more attractive, creative football, they almost get mocked by the press and by the sort of conservative football bodies in Scotland, people in Scotland. So yeah, it's a cultural problem for sure, and that they're always the hardest things to change.
What I like about that, Brian, is Alan's suggestion that there could be an outside organisation that is looking after Scottish football. I think that's what we need. I mean, there seems to be an attitude where we've always done it this way, so we're going to do it like this, right? But it doesn't work. But we've always done it this way, so we'll continue to make the same mistakes time and time again. And I had a discussion last night, actually. A big shout out. I had a discussion last night with the Green Sunrise podcast. Get it checked out. It's on YouTube. They do some great work. They're talking stress, anxiety, mental well-being, etc. It's brilliant. sharing experiences and how to deal with it better. Superb. And I was talking to the guys last night, all around the way that Scottish football operates and the way that it functions. And I mean, it also brings in where we are with the referees. It opens up a wider discussion this week of all weeks. And I know that, Brian, you were in on Monday, and I don't want to repeat any of the conversations, but just as a wider discussion, I mean, I think the best scenario would be that we just tear it up and start again with the referees. And if that means that, right, we're going to have to go professional with the refs, which means, let's say, 90% or more of the referees who are in position right now can't do the job. Okay, so we bring in temporary replacements from elsewhere. And then we start building a hub. We start building, like where we've got Lards with regards to producing coaches for every nation in Europe. Let's produce a hub, a training hub, where we create the best referees in European football. Why not just tear it up and start again? And I think it all comes down to just, that isn't radical, Brian. That is just how to improve the game. There's no radical thinking in that whatsoever. I mean, I'm a traditionalist when it comes to sponsorship. Obviously, looking into the reaction when C.R. Smith first appeared on the Celtic jerseys, the desecration of the hoops and all that. But now we're at a time, that was back in 84, I think, if memory serves me right. We're now at a time, 40 years later almost, where we all understand. I mean, look at the state of that for a sponsor on that Ireland jersey. That doesn't look good, does it? A massive, huge, big 3. Doesn't look good. And it just spoils the kit. But we understand that it's an income stream. The club needs it. But the clubs and the leagues and the authorities also need to accept change and embrace change, Brian.
Well, they do, but that in itself seems wholly ambitious because there's just no joined up thinking. Look at the SFA, they do their own thing. The TV deals, as Alan's alluded to, have often been terrible. There's a lack of ambition there. Look at the SPFL, there's no joined up thinking between those two bodies. Within that, the clubs that are self-serving, fighting amongst themselves. And you talk about refs. I remember, 42 minutes, Brendan Rodgers-Claxton. When Brendan Rodgers was here, he said, we're a professional league with amateur refs. It doesn't make any sense. And that's paraphrasing, but he was right. It's a nonsense. But it's a nonsense that's existed for so long. And unless there's fundamental change structurally at the top level, the simple things can't get fixed. Because although on paper, making refs professional, you go, yeah, so where's the funding for that? Who's paying for that? Is that the SPFL? Is that the SFA? Is that coming out of clubs' budgets? Is that coming out of the SFA's budget? Where does that come from? How are you training that? How are you advertising for that? How long is that onboarding process? So there's a lot of things to consider, but they're not difficult things to consider. They're just things that have to take a bit of sit down, a bit of planning. The fact that we get, some of the surfaces in the Scottish League are a disgrace. You don't try to play better football, you're playing in rugby parks. Some of it's nonsense. These are simple fixes. Adjusting ticket prices, try and fill stadiums and make the branding of the game more exciting. A simple fix, but again, you don't have that joined up conversation to do it. I remember for years I was talking about summer football because the weather's that bad in Scotland, it'd be better to do it during the summer. You would at least get an audience because there's no football on in the summer, bar international tournaments. And it was just like, but can I really? Because they need to shift one season and it's a bit hard and nobody really wants to do it. It's like, well, if you're not going to bother to help yourself, you can't complain when nobody else is going to help you. And in terms of the sponsorship stuff, I don't have any real strong feelings about who sponsors what clubs, if I'm honest. I'm not overly fussed. I think, because of that lack of joined up thinking, clubs need to try and do the best by themselves. And sometimes the easiest option is just to get a sponsor that's willing to give you the most money. So I don't have too strong an opinion. Although I have to say my favourite ever sponsor was Specsavers sponsoring the refs. It was just a wonderful irony that I can't believe it came. That was a massive gift. But we'll see. I say for Scottish football to survive and thrive, there's been big changes fundamentally, and it's a lot of corporate level, I think, and on a planning level, and then it can filter into the football. I think a lot of times we try to fix the football first, but everything else is still a miss.
The big thing as well is I think it will get to the point where people go on about the top two and then a gap between second and third and everybody else. But I think there's a gap developing between, it's already there, and it's continuing to develop between Celtic and all the rest. And we spoke about that a few weeks ago. When you look at all the aspects, not just the points difference in a league table, all the aspects and all the facets of a football club and where Celtic stand compared to everybody else. And it will eventually get to the point, I think, where they're looking at the league that they're playing in, they're looking at the association that governs them, and they think, well, you know, we've outgrown this, you know, and I think that if there is an opportunity around about that same time, be that a Super League or elsewhere, then Celtic will embrace that, because in order for us to look after our own club, fan base, brand and everything else, Brian, you've just got to look elsewhere. And a wee bit of fun, actually, I was looking there that FIFA 23, and I'm going to have to qualify this by telling anybody that's tuning in, I have never played FIFA. Lloyd, I don't know if you're a FIFA player. How long has the computer game FIFA been out? When did that get launched? It's been out forever, right?
That came out, well, the first one I'm sure came out over 30 years ago.
Wow.
So
I have never once played it. Never once.
never once played it?
Never
Get
played
your
it.
Ultimate Team sorted?
I have never played it, but apparently they do. They run a kind of gig every single year where people are named as some of the best talents in the game in European football. It's called the Communities Team of the Season, and Hatate and Jota have been nominated, which is why I'm talking about this. But when I was looking at that story, I thought to myself, FIFA, I know what it is. I've seen people playing it. I know it's probably a big part of people's spare time. I have never once sat there with a controller and played the game. So I'm going to, a wee bit of disclosure here. My kind of era was Sensible Soccer and Championship Manager. Now, Championship Manager was proper early 90s, as was Sensi Soccer. And I remember playing these games on the Amiga 500. But FIFA, no my bag. I'm guessing from your knowledge, Lloyd, that you are a FIFA player and a fan.
I am indeed. Well, I was a fan, but the gameplay is absolutely shocking. So, but the good thing about it is I can still play as Henrik Larsson in dreadlocks, so that's good enough for me.
Can you? Brilliant, superb. Now, Alan, without giving the game away regarding your date of birth and who was number one when you were born and all that stuff, what was your thing? What was your era? What did you play in terms
I'm
of
with
game?
you. I think if you've ever played Sensible Soccer, and I think I played it on the Sega Mega Drive, Sensible Soccer on the Sega Mega Drive. If you ever played that, you would never play another football game because the gameplay is just brilliant. It's absolutely superb. And I was a wouldn't be surprised people to know I was a championship manager. Absolute, addict, really. Days and weeks of my life have been spent playing Championship Manager. I didn't have room for any other games. Interesting, Paul. You might be surprised actually that apparently Celtic have got an esports team. There's a Celtic esports team, and apparently esports is quite big business. It's becoming, another way that clubs can build brand and attract marketing. Apparently, thousands of people will turn up to esports events and watch people play these games.
Wow.
So it is much as I'm probably with you in terms of kind of being slightly mocking of it, and I don't think it's aimed at our generation really, but there is actually an income stream that Celtic do take advantage of through their esports team, I believe.
No, fair play, by the way, right? Because, again, I'm not knocking gamers. I remember we had an interview with Joe Donnelly on here, which was superb, and he actually wrote a book about how it can be used positively for mental health, the escapism of gaming, etc. And I think, I'm delighted that Alan is on my bus when it comes to Sensible Soccer and Championship Manager. I remember the first one I used didn't even have proper player names, Lloyd, and the guy who developed the game was called Mark Collis, and you could find him playing for Cambridge, but he had fixed it so he was one of the best players in the game. And all that kind of stuff. Yes, it was easy. It was easy back then to be entertained, pre-internet, pre-mobile phones. Brian, are you of the same era? I mean, this conversation starts off with Hatate and Jota being recognised for their brilliance. That just in case anyone is wondering why we're going off on a tangent here. But Brian, where are you on the old gaming side of things?
I've never been a huge gamer. Usually FIFA, Grand Theft Auto. That was my sort of go-tos. I'm not sure what that says about my mentality, but that was the sort of games I used to play. What I remember, I don't get much time now because I've got the kids, but the FIFA Huffs used to take and Lloyd will know about this if he's played it.
Mhm.
You're playing your mates. The huffs, the tantrums are real. I mean, it's embarrassing when you see two 30-year-olds having a shouting match, a real life shouting match, and you're flat.
Controllers do get thrown.
The colours get thrown. It's a bit of nonsense. So, but no, I do enjoy it when I get the chance. But sadly, I don't get the chance to play anymore. Actually, it's funny you talk about ages and stuff sometimes, Paul, because everything makes me feel old now. I'm not on social media or anything. So people talk about Twitch streams, I never know what they're talking about. We talk about TikToks, I go, I don't know how to work TikTok, I can't do it. So I actually probably feel older than anyone in the Acsom crew because I'm so detached from. I'm a bit of a digitard, I think is the phrase.
Is that now the phrase? It's interesting though because I use Facebook and Twitter. That's my go-to social media channels, and they're both completely different, as everybody knows. But obviously, we stream to Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And last night on the Green Sunrise podcast, I was joined by one of the other guests was a fellow called Wee Wido. That's his name, Wee Wido. And you might have seen him on Twitter, actually, big Celtic fan. But he does his thing on TikTok. So I was having a wee chat with him afterwards, and I was like, obviously I know what TikTok is, but I've not explored it. I don't know if that is the place for Acsom or that's the place for me. And he said, probably not, actually. You're not missing it. It probably isn't a platform that's going to benefit you. So I'm going to stay away from that. I'm not going to download the app. I'm not going to waste any more of my life on another platform. 100% not going to do that. Now, listen, before we move on to the next point of discussion.
Paul, sorry to interrupt. Somebody in the comments did mention Subbuteo, and I have to say, as an absolutely massive Subbuteo collector myself, and I still play the game, you can't get better than that. Old school, get the players out, get the pitch on.
Listen, you're opening this up now. You're opening this wide open because, I mean, what you're doing now is I can actually see a box just through there with Super Cup football by Tommy. And if anyone's ever played that, I'm telling you something, by the way, that would rival your Subbuteo. There you go. There's a debate in itself. But I do have Subbuteo. Subbuteo's out there. Dukla Prague away strip team isn't, unfortunately, although I would like it to be. Sarah Hoyen, hopefully I got your name right. Good afternoon, boys and girls. It's great to see names new and old. And I think Kay Matsu, welcome back, is saying yes to should Iwata start over Mooy. And we've also got Juan Sanchez, Villalobos, Ramirez, one the Celtic and one Brecon City. That's your thing. If that's your bag, superb. Durban Culture need to get Mooy up to match sharpness, but maybe not on this surface. 45 minutes, maybe. We'll see how that goes. Joe Hamilton, Friday, and the absolute meltdown continues. Yeah, it absolutely does. The meltdown has been quite a joy to watch, to the point where the credibility, if there was any credibility in the people I'm talking about, of some pundits is non-existent now after the last week. Paddy Lavery, always a pleasure to see you popping up. Love that avatar photo, the three of you and your Acsom hoops as well. A very important message, and we have been sharing this over the last 4 weeks or so, is missing 28-year-old Reece Roger, who is still missing. And I'll tell you what, if you follow this on Facebook in particular, you'll know that the efforts that was going in by the friends and family to go up and search this area is astonishing, to be honest with you. And they will continue this weekend. And if you do have any information in relation to Reece, please call 101. And the reference number is 1348 of the 19th of March. So that just shows you how long ago that was. The 19th of March, a month ago, he's gone out with his mates camping, fishing, and he's not been seen since 11:30 at night on the 18th of March. So please, any information, however minimal you may think that it is, it might help the investigation, and get in touch, because the family are obviously very, very concerned about the welfare of Reece. It would be great for him to be reunited with his family now. There was a headline, you've probably seen it, all the news sources picked it up. Lenny says that Larsson would be worth 100 million quid. And I was asking the guys yesterday, Lloyd, in relation to that. Okay, that's a very difficult thing to say how much a player would be worth in the current era. But we were asking the question, Kyogo, the man of the moment, 28 goals this season. Is he the best since Larsson? Now, there's been some cracking strikers since Henrik Larsson. And some of those that I've mentioned myself is Odsonne Edouards, let's not forget, very, very talented young man. Scott Sinclair, Moussa Dembele, Lee Griffiths, Chris Commons, Gary Hooper. Someone pointed out Scott McDonald was prolific. And for talent alone, I had a good chat yesterday, and people said, but maybe they didn't score 30 goals a season for Celtic, but for talent alone, you had Robbie Keane, you had Craig Bellamy. Is Kyogo the best since Larsson? I'm going to throw that out today, Lloyd. What do you reckon?
It's hard to say, because when you mention names like Bellamy, Keane, Dembele, Edouard, Kyogo is up there with them. Is he the best since Larsson? I don't know. I still think you need to see a little bit more of him, but he does have the qualities to do it. Will he ever get anywhere near Larsson's goal record? No, but for me, Dembele's still the best since Larsson.
Sometimes the way I think about this is, in my mind, I've got like my ultimate Celtic 11 from players that I have watched, and it stayed the same for a long time. And it was people that you might think, oh, that's predictable. Paul McStay's obviously played in the midfield, but Dembele broke into my greatest Celtic 11. That's how highly I rated him. And he's definitely up there. Alan, I'm going to throw this to you. Who do you think is the best Celtic striker since Henrik Larsson?
Probably not surprise you. I'm not going to give you a straight answer, but so I think in terms of just sheer talent and ability. So if you were picking like a sort of best of 11, and therefore how would that team play, sort of thing, you'd probably want the best all-round footballer, which would probably be Dembele of those players mentioned. However, what we've got with Kyogo is probably the most perfect synthesis of style of play and individual talent in harmony that we've had of any striker, really, in terms of, I don't know that you could get a better player to play precisely the role that Kyogo's asked to play, and to do it as well. And I think that's his gift, because really, outside of scoring goals and harrying the opposition, he's rarely involved in the game. And of all the strikers that you've mentioned, rarely touches the ball, really. But he does exactly what he's asked to do, and he does it superbly well. So in terms of that, if you were going to pick a best of 11 and they had to play Ange's system, you'd pick Kyogo. But if you had to pick an all-round footballer just to play, I don't know, 4-4-2 or something, you'd probably go with Dembele as an all-round footballer.
Yeah, it's interesting. Peter yesterday mentioned that, the fact that Kyogo, when the ball's not there or the attack's not on, very, very rarely involved in the game. That's a great point. I'm bringing this one up. Alfredo Morelos ate my horse. We probably should have brought this up earlier in the show to get more comments up. And Alfredo had a full stadium for Subbuteo, but only about a dozen fans. I find it funny when people have a big game on what is now called Football Manager, Alan, and they actually put the suit on as if it's a cup final and all that. That's taking it a step too far.
I've never done that, to be fair.
No, I have never done that either. Brian, what's your take, Brian, on the big debate then around Larsson, Kyogo, Dembele, and the fleeting strikers like Robbie Keane, like Craig Bellamy, who were phenomenal players for Celtic, but they weren't here that long.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, I always think comparing players is really, really hard, because in different teams they perform differently. They could be, what is a great player? There's so many different attributes to it. I would say Kyogo's the best since Larsson, purely because he's the one that's most compared. He's almost the same breath. Now, no one's saying he's as good as Larsson, right? We'll never see a player as good as Larsson up front for Celtic, I don't think. But he's got that talismanic quality. He's got that sort of extra thing where, people just sort of, there's something about him that's just that bit extra. So it's a kind of unquantifiable thing. And I think that's why, I don't remember too often Dembele being compared to Larsson, or talk about the same breath, or mention about his movement and stuff, despite the fact that I agree with that. I think Dembele's a wonderful player. But I just think Kyogo's got that extra element, and maybe it's because of that synthesis Al mentions. But for me, Kyogo's movement, the types of goals he scores, the way he comes up with them, and I think the influence of him, I think he scares teams in a way that some of the other strikers didn't. So just for the sort of extra qualities around him, I think Kyogo's the best striker since Larsson.
It'll be interesting to see if he hits his 29th and 30th goals of the season this weekend, and if he does, Celtic will have hit 100 themselves in the league this season. Is that right, Alan? Is it in the league or is it domestic? I think is it domestic or in the league? 100 goals.
Sure.
Phenomenal,
Really? Okay.
phenomenal record.
Yeah.
By the way, big shout out to our friends over in Newry. They've got a big weekend this weekend. We've spoken about it previously. There's going to be the unveiling of the Willie Maley statue. We've been talking about it for a while because obviously they've been raising funds for some time. A phenomenal looking statue, and all the best to everybody involved in the Willie Maley Memorial Group and everybody that's going over there, as well as the locals who are going to enjoy the unveiling of that. Again, I read this morning, very interestingly enough, the Green Brigade have requested that for the semi-final everybody turns up with the due to the 120 years of the hoops, first worn in 1903, scarves, banners and jerseys. Get the green and white out. There's going to be the absence of a tifo. It'll be like a human tifo, just to make it a sea of green and white. So I'm sure you've seen it on Twitter. One final thing, I've pointed out that jersey behind us. It is fully signed, 16 signatures including Roy Keane and Martin O'Neill, and that is a raffle prize should you decide to buy a ticket for the Alan Thompson gig at the end of this month at Gracie's. You will be entered into the prize draw to win that fully signed jersey. The ticket link is underneath the video, and there's a few left, although not many. Thank you everybody for getting involved in the comment section. But Brian and I, we've been on twice this week, Brian. And after Monday, as often happens, because we go away off on tangents, we forgot a very special shout out. So over to you.
So just want to shout out to my brother Dolty, big Dolty from Penally. He won his first amateur fight last week there, just on the 7th of April. He's not the greatest time of things over the past few years, but he showed that strength and character and mentality I've spoke about a lot of time. Picked himself up, trained hard, fought well, and stopped the boy in the third round. So Dolty, love you, bro. Very proud of you. Well done.
Superb. And what a way to finish the Friday show. Hope everybody has a phenomenal weekend. All that's left for me to say is Brian, Lloyd and Alan, thank you all for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.